So with me tonight, we have a very special guest. Many special guests are on the way. But right now, we have Mr. John Tavano, one of Newburyport's hidden treasures, really. Maybe not so hidden, I don't know. I think after tonight's show, he'll be a little bit more exposed, I'm sure. Mr. John has been a local musician and artist for several years in the area. In addition to classical guitar and bossa nova and Latin and world styles, he's also a painter and artist. And I would also say that he's probably an artistic culturalist as well. He and I enjoy many conversations since I met him several years ago about art and culture in the world. And we're very proud to have him on the show tonight to play and talk a little bit about art and culture. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Great. So we're going to continue on and with another piece of Mr. John's picking, and then we're going to talk with him a little bit about some cultural events and happenings in the area. So I hope you enjoy this next piece.
This piece was actually written in the 1920s, and it's called a choro, which is a Brazilian street song written by Villa-Lobos, who was, in fact, the national composer of Brazil. And so here, this is called a choro. Oh, well, like I said earlier, it's called a choro, which is a Brazilian folk song. And Villa-Lobos, like a lot of Latin composers, took music from the streets, from the neighborhoods, from the bars. And a lot of the music was created that way. And of course, when you had Villa-Lobos, who studied music in Paris in the 1920s, like most composers of the Impressionist period, they took music off the streets and used the current styles to form and shape the music. And Villa-Lobos was he was a forerunner of that, using a lot of folk styles of type music and also imitating the music of the country, not just of the people, but also of the landscape, also the climate, that kind of thing too. Yeah.
Now I'm hearing a connection between music and art. Was that paralleling itself during this time, and it was kind of reflecting back and forth? I guess maybe my question is where the musicians inspiring the artists and vice versa?
Well, I think it was really technology that was challenging the artists. I think at the advent of photography, I think that music and art became what was called the Impressionist period, giving people an impression or trying to capture in a painting an image or a vision that couldn't be captured in photography.
Are we talking about like moods and emotion?
Yes, moods, emotion, just feelings, gestures, ideas, fabric, things like that. We all said that the cameras began to steal away the reality of the public, but the painter actually captured the spirit of the public, even through the music. And I think that was an important thing. Now, with our friend here, Beethoven, I did this painting a few years ago, and he's staring at me. And I have to really worry about practicing, and luckily he can't hear us. Well, he probably can now. But Beethoven, he was the composer that really taught us how to listen to music, even though he couldn't hear it. And he, again, would have been considered one of the great jazz players of today. Because improvisation was the style. Mozart, Bach, Chopin, those composers, and Beethoven probably at the highest level. But fate played a nasty trick on him. But yet we're left with, the wonderful masterpiece. So he's always been an inspiration to me. So I did this painting a few years ago. But I think that's what happened at that time, is that the painters needed to capture the spirit of the folks rather than the actual image of the people through the camera.
Well, certainly your performance of that piece, I think, captured the spirit of that time in essence. And
right.
Again, I've always believed that music and art is really a window to another place and time that kind of keeps it open and allows us to kind of look into it and still enjoy it and really kind of experience it probably as it was when it was being created.
I think also that when you're learning the periods of art, if we think about the periods of art during the time of, say, Rembrandt, who at that time was considered the Baroque period, the music at that time written by Bach and Telemann, it really reflected the styles of architecture, the styles of fashion, the styles of literature, and very ornamented, very decorative, just as the paintings. The same with artists like Vermeer, who painted the true reality of the pictures in the 18th, 17th century, but as the time went on, the paintings became more and more out of focus as the photography became more in focus. And music, we began to listen to what was going on, and in between the lines, the music that was the most important notes in music were the ones that weren't written, the ones that created the anticipation, and the master of interpreting music, or the master of the anticipation of music, was Beethoven. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really glad that you were able to join us on the show so far. Tons of great knowledge and concepts and ideas of culture and music and art. And I'm glad you brought our dear friend, Mr. Beethoven, along with us. Yeah. He's joining us this evening. We still have quite a bit of a show to go, so we're going to get into some more of this. And I'd like to invite to the into the studios at this point, is another great and fantastic improviser, musician, culturalist, artisan, carpenter, and just generally a great human being all around. And that's Mr. Albert Lamar. Thank you for joining us tonight. Yeah, fantastic. Good to see you again. Snappy shirt. I like that.
Trying to play the part here.
Yeah, yeah.
My construction clothes off. Probably still a little dust in my hair.
That's all right. Well, if there's not sawdust on the floor, you're not making a thing.
That's right.
So that's right. I hope we get some sawdust on the floor tonight. Well, great. I think with all that said, let's get into another song and demonstrate how some of these intersections of art and creativity come into action.
And I think that this next piece we're going to play is called Wave. And it was an important landmark piece in the late 1950s by the composer Antonio Carlos Jobim, who wrote Girl from Ipanema and Stefanato. And this piece called Wave was really a way of telling the musical world that there is a wave happening. And this new wave is the combination of the African samba, American jazz, Brazilian folk music. And it also ended up on the page of this music, what we call bossa nova, which really means new beat. So we're going to play this wave. Are you going to play bass on this?
I am. Yep. Let me grab that bass and new beat coming right at you.
Sounds good, man.
Thank you, Albert. It's fantastic. Thanks for joining us tonight. Great flute playing. Now, could you tell us what kind of flute is that? I know there's all different kinds. There's piccolos and altos and tenors.
This is just a standard C flute, and it's got a lot of history for me. It's just a Yamaha flute. It's a nice flute, but the head joint is made by a guy named Dana Sheridan, really good flute maker. And I really like it a lot. Played it for years, about 35 years.
Wow, that's really must have some history. What note, just off the top of my head, I have this question. What note do you think you've played the most on that flute?
Well, let me see. Yeah, it must be a C, because I said, let me see. Yeah, that's it. Fantastic, great stuff.
Now, John, this piece that we were just playing, this bossa nova, came from Brazil, popularized, I guess, in the early '60s, and pretty much since then, it hasn't let go of the world. Now, what do you think our friend Mr. Beethoven would think about this style of music?
I think he would have loved it. He would have thought it was fantastic. Beethoven was such what we consider classical music today. Back then, it would have been considered more like jazz. They were very inventive, creative people, and he would have thought this piece was wonderful. He would have loved any of this because he was the founder of what they call the new beat. Right? Beethoven was the link between the classical and romantic period.
And what years were those?
Beethoven's years were 1770 to 1827. Most of his important period was probably between 1805 and 1817, in that period of time, yeah. And of course, he was involved with a lot of, he was very political, and he admired Napoleon very much because of his Republican ideas, but when Napoleon decided to declare himself emperor, Beethoven got very upset, and his Third Symphony, which he decided that originally to dedicate to Napoleon, he ended up just scratching out his name on the thing because he was very upset that he became just another dictator, as what Beethoven thought of it. But
well, it's very interesting how culture, music, and arts kind of are in this I guess soup, if you will, soup of humanity with politics and economics, and it's really a lot of this stuff is pretty inseparable, and how these themes kind of repeat throughout history.
Bossa Nova really it had a lot of political overtones to it because of the artists were at odds with the government to such a degree, and the music that was written at this time was really representing a very laid back, kind of a lazy drift type of thing, but also in a very, very romantic way. And when the music became a little bit more challenging, a little bit more edgy, I think the composers started to feel like they were getting into a little bit of trouble. And a lot of that was stopped, a lot of music stopped. But this bossa nova music, the wave and Ipanema and De Stefano and Black Horse, all of that music had such a strong hold over the cultures in the late 1950s and early 60s, and it would have had probably a greater impact in the United States in the early 60s had not those four guys from Liverpool show up, and they just kind of changed the landscape. And the Beatles did a lot of bossa nova music. They didn't call it that, but they did a lot of music with Latin rhythms, and that's why probably their music has sustained for so many years, just as the bossa nova has.
Yeah, amazing how this stuff overlaps, even in amongst itself. Now, just to kind of bring us back to the future, so to speak. We have, of course, Yankee Homecoming is coming up. 2014 Yankee Homecoming is coming up next week, and I do believe that the Latin Quarter, which I'm honored to be a part of, and Mr. Albert Lamar and John Tavano have been performing in that group for a number of years now, which performs predominantly bossa nova, world musics, little gypsy jazz, and also many of John Tavano's original material that has a very heavy Spanish flamenco Latin influence on it, and hopefully maybe he'll stick around long enough to play some of that tonight. But we actually have a performance coming up over Yankee Homecoming on Wednesday, That would be Wednesday, July 30th on the waterfront stage at 2 p.m. to 3. So you're welcome to come out and join us, and hopefully, weather permitting, it's going to be a beautiful day to throw some frisbees and listen to some wonderful
Hopefully not at
music. Hopefully not at us, of course. Well, let's get into another piece, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure.
What shall we do?
How about Felice Adagio?
That sounds great.
You want to talk a little bit about this piece?
Yes, yeah, if you would, that would be great.
In the late, probably in like 1957 or 58, the movie Black Orpheus came down, which was a Latin version of the Greek mythology, and some of the music that came out of that became world famous. The theme from Black Orpheus that Chuck and I played earlier, and this piece is called A Felice Adagio. It comes from the movie, which means happiness is difficult and misery is always with us. Some really happy theme like that. It's rather depressing, but the piece is not depressing, so we'll give it a try. It's called A Felice Adagio.
Splendid. Always fun making music with you guys. Sounds great here at PortMedia in Newburyport. We're very pleased to have Mr. Albert Lamar and John Devano, part of the Latin Quarter. I myself included, Chuck Walker, your host of Sound Sessions, and also very honored to be a part of their group. And we'll be performing this coming Wednesday at Yankee Homecoming, 3 o'clock on the, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock on the waterfront stage. Now, I understand that as a duo, you both have a few pieces that you've been working on, and I've been hearing about this one piece, On Track, I believe, if that's ready to be unveiled.
We don't have it ready tonight.
Okay, well that's entirely fine because I'm sure we got to maintain the integrity of the music and our talents, so that's very understandable. But I guess, like, many great musicians before us and entertainers, always leave them wanting a little bit more. So there you have it. Be on the lookout for that one coming up. Now, do you have a duo piece that you'd like to do together? One that you might have ready?
Would you like to do, how about the Apple to the Melody? Sure. Want to try that? Sure. Okay.
Sounds great. Sounds great. I'm going to take my leave for a moment and let these two make some magic together. Before I do, I just want to talk with Mr. Albert just for a moment or two, because this gentleman has been such a part of so many music scenes, I would say probably throughout the country, and I might not even maybe the world. I'm sure you have experiences all over the place and have been influenced and have influenced many other players and students and so forth. Do you have perhaps just a quick story to tell us about maybe one of your adventures elsewhere before you kind of found yourself in Newburyport, musically speaking?
I guess I'm thinking about, I went to Colombia, South America, about a few years ago, and I had a really good time doing that. It was a little frightening. It was, right after all the drug cartel stuff, or not right after it, but
Yeah.
anyway, things have calmed down a lot. And but we were all, just a bunch of Americans who've watched too many news programs about stuff like that, so we were all scared.
Now, you went down with a group. What was
Yeah.
the name of the group?
It was Bill Murphy was band leader, but it was a lot of good musicians from all over the country.
And what took you down there?
Bill he's one of those movers and shakers in the music world that he just knows all kind of people, and he's good at getting gigs going. And he met some people, and the next thing you know, we're playing in Bogota and Ibagué, Colombia.
And so you mentioned, of course you saw the TV, and, our culture has images of things, and especially if you've never been there, it kind of puts these ideas in our heads. So what did you find when you actually went there? How did you find the people and the culture?
Amazing. Just very warm people, hardworking, just a tough economy like you find, outside the States or Europe, but just everybody was just hustling for a buck, just working as hard as they could, and just met so many wonderful people, and the food was great. One thing I really remember was when we played our big concert. It was outside, and it was the streets were packed. I mean, we were pretty much nobodies, I mean, we're, hometown boys from from the South. Some of the people had a name, but everybody in town was there. The governor of the state we were in was there, and it was on national TV. The people were just dead quiet during the whole concert. I mean, absolutely, you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, it was just outside. It was amazing.
And the music, was it jazz or some contemporary pieces, originals, standards? What give us a picture of what it sounded like?
Yeah, it was a lot of jazz standards and originals. Some just a lot of kind of a mishmash. And we were the headliner that night, but there was some beautiful Colombian bands and South American bands that played, and we met a lot of musicians. It was fascinating. It really was.
That's amazing. Well, thank you very much for sharing that story. It's always great to hear, how music reaches out and touches people all over the world. And, I truly believe it's the universal language, and it speaks to all of us and, helps unite and create community. So let's continue creating a community with a little bit of duo with Mr. John Devano and Albert Lamar on acoustic guitar and flute.
Afro-Cuban lullaby. And it was a combination of what we talked about earlier, the music, folk music, combination of folk music, cultural and ethnic music, combined with a little bit of contemporary harmonies. This arrangement was by the Cuban composer Leo Brouwer, and it's called the Afro-Cuban Lullaby.
Great. Well, looks like we're shifting gears a little bit. We have the alto flute is about to make its appearance on. Here comes the story. I love that. That's what I love about this guy. Let's hear this story.
This is about a Newburyport native who made good, actually. Charlie Mariano. Actually, he's from Boston, but he lived in Newburyport for a while. World famous jazz musician. My wife's father. When he lived in New Jersey for a short stint, when Melanie and I lived in New York City, he didn't want to play music when he was in the States because he lived in Europe most of the time and did most of his gigs there. So he'd gig 6 months out of the year, and then he'd come home and want to relax and play cards with my wife, his daughter, and whoever would play with him and just have fun. But anyway, I'd go to his house, and Melanie and him would play cards, and I don't really play cards, you know, so I'd just be like, oh man, what am I doing here? I'm trying to get my music chops together. But he had this alto flute, and it's a great flute. He's a sax player, but he plays really good, or played really good flute. He just died a few years ago. But this was, 35 years ago, and when he died recently, a few years ago, his wife, his widow, sent this flute to me. She didn't even know that I used to love it and play it, and she just was generous and sent me this for a gift, and it was just wonderful, real divine providence. I felt like because I've had a lot of fun playing it.
That's a great story, and I'm sure it's going to sound great. Let's hear some of that living jazz come out of that flute tonight. Thanks, Albert. right. Fantastic, gentlemen. I was just out in the green room greeting our next band that's about to come in, the Funky Fedoras. They're no stranger to sound sessions here at PortMedia. They're going to be filing in and doing their setup, and I think while they're doing that behind us, I just want to take a quick opportunity to discuss a little bit more about some music and art with Mr. John, since we have our friend and almost grandfather, Mr. Beethoven, with us. One thing that, myself as a student of music, that the takeaway, probably the big takeaway that I got from when I learned about him and listening to his music was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he really was probably one of the first or predominant composers to expose the movement, the resolution, the 5 to the 1. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think that was really came about during actually Sebastian Bach's sons, who were the teachers of Mozart, who really had that idea behind the 5 to the 1. Okay. Yeah, that really came from that particular time frame. Yeah, but Beethoven took a lot of liberties in his music, and I think that if you look a lot at his scores, you see these, the triple F, the fortissimo, and the orchestras were so loud, and it was probably because he couldn't hear them. And so he made that the orchestras were very, very loud in some of the places. But Beethoven was really removed the music from the church, and he was probably one of the very first that was almost like a freelance. And one of his great pleasures in life was to go to this. It was a pub in Vienna called the Black Swan. And what he would do there is that he would go there and improvise. They'd have improvisation contests. And of course he would always win. And if he didn't win, he would make the other people very uncomfortable. And he would make them, but he would always, he was such an inventive player. And also the link between classical, more intellectual music to romantic music, where music became thematic, where music meant something, that this piece of music was a metaphor for this. And he wrote music called the Pastorelle Symphony, which was a music that was written in homage to the countryside. Whereas Mozart, he was the great classical re-engineer, if you would. A lot of the things that he saw in the music that came before him, he felt unnecessary, and it really stole away the listener's focus. So a lot of music, a lot of what he looked at in his compositions were just to write music that would just show just the subject. This is all that's necessary for the ear to hear. And Beethoven was the link between that classical period and the romantic period.
Great. Well, thank you for that assessment and correcting my my kind of vision of of the accomplishments that he's done over the years, and because his presence is really ever present, I think, amongst all musicians today. And I did understand that he experimented, but I didn't until tonight really grasp how much of an improviser and creative experimenter that he was. So that's great.
All of the piano sonatas that he wrote in the early time were written for him to perform, and a lot of them were just written as improvisations, and he would write them in a way that only he would know. And a lot of those improvs in those days, and even the piano concertos, especially Mozart's piano concertos, they weren't written out. The orchestral part, the tutti, was written out, but the piano was left to the person who was going to do the performance, and usually it was the composer. Mm-hmm. And then later on, people would begin to write them out, either Beethoven would write them out or the other composers would. But they were like jazz people. We think it's been so, there's been so much education in universities and scholars around the studies of these great composers, but when they were alive, their idea was to make music on the spot. Yeah, because that's what it was. It was music. You made music then. It was here and now.
I dig that. I'm with that. Let's make it on the spot. That's
what they did.
Good stuff. Well, good stuff. Well, thank you once again, John, for coming in at Sound Sessions. We hope you'll come back sometime. Excellent. Well, live and direct from PortMedia, we are broadcasting Sound Sessions, our July 2014 installment. And this is the Funky Fedoras, and they're going to keep that bossa nova vibe flowing, that new beat that's just continues to flow through the decades with a very familiar one entitled The Girl from Ipanema. Guys, why don't you just take it away? Good. Nice little sound check going on right there. All right. What do we have next on deck? Oh, nice. One of my personal favorites. The Funky Fedoras have been working together, I would say, 10 months or maybe a little over a year now. And they actually have a couple performances coming up here at Yankee Homecoming this next week. They're going to be performing on Wednesday from 1 o'clock to 2 p.m. at the Waterfront Stage on Wednesday, July 30th. And then they'll also be performing on Saturday from noon to 1 o'clock at the Market Square Stage, surrounded by all those great vendors that are going to be there at the Yankee Homecoming. So come on out, grab a little lunch, and enjoy some open-air jazz. They have built up quite a repertoire of jazz standards over the past couple of months. And in addition to the jazz standards, such as like Blue Bossa, Girl from Ipanema, they have great ones like Pass the Peas, the funky Pass the Peas, or Chameleon. And lately, they've been in quite a bit of a original material writing phase, a compositional phase, if you will. And maybe we'll hear one or two of those tonight, or maybe they're going to want to wait to unveil those on the big stage. But whatever the case may be, or whatever they're playing, it has a little snappy beat, and I hope you're enjoying it. So without anything further said, let's move on to the next song. All right. Great. So I think that last piece they just performed was by the great jazz guitarist John Scofield, made popular when he was performing with Martin Medeski and Wood. Now this next tune we're going to do, I'm going to join them for this one. It's one of my personal favorites, and it's a little bit of a departure from jazz per se, although it has many jazzy elements. Reggae, in fact, has a great foundation for a lot of improvisation, and this next piece is entitled Swing Easy. I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's take that one from the top again. That's all right, that's all right. You do like the horse. All right, here we go. Let's count it in. All right, hold it up, hold it up. Let's wheel it back around. Hold on a second, hold up, hold up. We're gonna do it right. Take it from the top. We all set? Here we go. Swinging easy. swinging easy. PortMedia. Are we prepared to unveil our original reggae tune? All right, so yeah, we are ready to unveil a brand new original track from Funky Fedoras, direct from PortMedia in Newburyport. This one is entitled The Horse. Let's take it from the top. Sweet maiden voyage. The horse riding strong. Stallions in the meadow, across the fields, over the mountains and hills. Music has that power. Puts images in our minds, in our hearts, emotions. That's what it's all about, creativity, art. Like we had Mr. John Tavano on earlier speaking about a lot of the great intersections of art, music, and culture throughout history. We're here today, live and direct, presenting that stuff to you. So we're going to continue with another, I believe a standard now. We're going to shift gears back out of our reggae mode for a moment and maybe back into one of our classic jazz standards. I was covering while you guys thought of something.
You do Soul Moments.
Nice. Excellent. So yeah, like the great Frank Sinatra always said, play a fast one, then play a slow one. Play a fast one, then play a slow one. We're going to play a moderately slow one, a really wonderfully textured piece written by the great Oliver Nelson. He was a fantastic saxophone player and piano player, arranger, and composer. And this one's entitled Stolen Moments. I hope you enjoy it. that Oliver Nelson tune. That was great, Stolen Moments. Great tune. I would like to take just a brief moment and talk about that piece a little more in-depthly. And excuse my reach, just to give that a little piece. Yeah, so Oliver Nelson's piece, Stolen Moments, it's a great piece. It really utilizes one of the fabrics of music today, in particularly jazz and popular music, and that's the blues, the 12-bar blues. And what Oliver did was he kind of rearranged it a little bit. He added a little bit of a 4-bar intro, and he adjusted. We were talking a little bit earlier about that resolution of the 5 chord to the 1. The 5 chord, in a nutshell, kind of creates a little bit of tension, and it likes to resolve back to the 1 or the tonal center of a song. And in this particular piece, it's in the key of C minor, concert C minor, and so C minor's 5 chord is G. Now what Oliver did was he kind of stretched that out a little bit. He played around with, like John Tavano was telling us earlier, that it was a bit more of Bach's son Johann Sebastian Bach and Mozart that kind of really delved into this whole play of tension and release. And jazz has become a very integral part of the very fabric of jazz as we know it today, that tension and release. And in this particular piece, in this case, he stretches it out with a chromatic movement and then finally resolves it back to the 1. So there's a lot of, I guess, fertile compositional and harmonic ground and fruitful creative areas to explore in that, from that resolution, from tension to release. It's, as a good friend of mine used to always say, it's always in the dismount is kind of where you find yourself. So in this case, Mr. Oliver is dismounting himself with a chromatic movement all the way back to the 1. And it creates this very kind of moody, mellow, and textured piece. And I thought you guys did a great job of performing through that. Now, as you were performing on this piece, if I may be so bold to ask, what was going through your mind as you were soloing? Are you thinking notes? Are you thinking mood? Are you thinking, where the heck am I on this fretboard? Or a combination of all the above? Or are you just zenning it out and there's no thought at all?
I guess all the above. No, in this case, I actually was playing C minor pentatonic, pretty much, with a couple of notes thrown in. Something I can practice. So.
And, for those of you out there who don't know the C minor pentatonic or what a pentatonic scale is, I'm sure you can almost derive that it's made up of 5 notes. And it's really a very valuable workhorse for us musicians, the pentatonic scale, both the major and the minor. We could utilize that over many pieces. So it almost becomes a very foundational scale that beginning students, and even, I guess, once a student, you're always a student, that we're always kind of reinforcing and learning. So great. No, it sounded really great. It seemed to work out really well. Now, back to the drums. My friend Max on the drums. Now, as you're playing through this piece, how do you control the dynamics of that piece? Do you have it planned out, or are you kind of just feeling it out in the moment?
I kind of just go with when someone solos, I want to make sure I'm not louder than them, so I just try and quiet down. Or if I can't hear someone else, then I quiet down as well to make sure, it's important to hear them if you're going to play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, since I'm over here for a moment, I would love to do a little exploration of the drums, if you would mind demonstrating a few beats for us tonight. Could you just a few measures, if you would, and feel free to get as creative as you like. First off, I'd like to kind of demonstrate a few different styles of jazz drumming. First, can we hear maybe just a nice standard swing style? Very nice. Well done. Now, in contrast to that, one of the pieces you played earlier, John Scofield's Chank, you're using a different beat, probably the funk beat. Could you demonstrate that for us? Very nice. Excellent. Now, we also did a different style earlier in the evening as we were kind of making our transition from Bossa Nova with John and Mr. Albert. Could you demonstrate a Bossa Nova or a Bossa Nova groove if you could? Very nice, very nice. And just to contrast that, because, to me, I think, music is really a collection of contrasts, fast and slow, loud and soft, tension and release. And to contrast that kind of more mellow, tightly knit Latin or Bossa Nova beat, would you do me the honor of playing some free jazz drums?
Free jazz. What do you mean by that?
Maybe a la like Sun Ra or Ornette Coleman.
No, I'm not getting you right now. It's just like all over.
Can I demonstrate perhaps? This is one of my favorite because it's it's all part of the smorgasbord, if you would. Indulging me a little bit because that actually is, although maybe a small portion of what we consider to be jazz, it's a very important one. It's usually not heard on radio stations until after midnight or maybe in the wee hours of the morning, but it really encompasses and maybe encapsulates a very free and emotional connection to just letting your emotion flow very freely. I've also often seen a lot of free jazz charts that don't really have notes on them. They could be pictures or drawings or different types of colors thrown onto a page, and the players interpret that, and then the music comes out. So there's a lot of pathways to express music and creativity. Now, before I leave the drum station, I have one more request from you. And I'm going to kind of use this to kind of use the other band, and we're going to build a little something with this right here in the moment. Can we go back to that? Actually, could you give me maybe a rock beat? Let's shift gears into the rock realm, something nice and steady and beat. And then I'm going to walk over to the Mr. Basie. We're going to ask him in the key of E. And just lay down like a nice, there you go. Nice little bass lick. A bass ostinato, a repeating bass line. We're gonna keep building this up. Keep that up if you would. Now over to the guitar. Now what chord do you have going on right there?
It's E, basic E.
All right, sounds good. Once you keep that up and running, now we'll see if Mr. Sax is ready to lay down a line. Sound like some free jazz right there. I like that. I like your interpretation. I like that. All right, on the count of 4, I want you guys to hold up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. You guys were there before me, so that's great. That's how we work it. So as we're kind of here in the workshop putting together a piece, of course, kind of we come into a lot of there's many things about the instruments that are the same, and there's a lot of things that are a little bit different. And in particular, I think Mr. Sam, I usually kind of bug him because I usually pick some guitar-centric keys, and then that kind of puts him in a little bit of a pickle as he's trying to navigate the guitar keys on the saxophone and vice versa. So we kind of ran into that. but which created a nice little rock free jazz kind of vibe. So there you have it. It's like usually a mishmash collage of creativity and art here at PortMedia. All right. So hopefully that gave you guys enough time to think of the next one you want to play. I like the funk, and I have always a special request for perhaps Past the Peas or even Chameleon or something of that. Chameleon, because what key is that in?
Key of Chameleon.
Good answer. It's in concert B flat, which just happens to be a very friendly key for most horn players.
Now I can answer. It is the key of G.
Key of G for the horn, in horn speak, and B flat for concert players. So
It's basically the first real scale / key you really learn. So
foundations, that's what we're all about. All right, gentlemen, why don't you take it away with Herbie Hancock's Chameleon.